Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rolling. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm waiting for my esteemed co-host, John Scalia. And there is John. All right. We're going to go ahead and mod him up. It's a beautiful thing. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody on both Facebook Live as well as Clubhouse. And my name is Steve Appel. I'm in beautiful Southern California, Los Angeles. And I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. John Scalia, out there in Munich, Germany. And we do the Work Comp Matters every Monday and Friday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time to talk about the news, current events, and issues that we believe interest you employees, employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. Work Comp Matters is brought to you, of course, by mancavepodcasting.com. We have over 600 podcasts in the tank. They're available to you 24/7. They're completely free, no obligation. You don't even have to subscribe or follow, although we would like you to subscribe and follow. But all you have to do is go on to mancavepodcasting.com, click the link, and you know what? You're set. I mean, whether or not you want to check one out for 5 minutes and close it down, or you want to binge a couple, that's cool. And of course, if you want to do your own podcast, I'll be happy to take a very small chunk of your change. But we will produce, direct, manage, get your podcast streamed live. Of course, the content is all yours. Get it into the cloud forever, all for one low fee. But for now, thank you for joining in to Work Comp Matters. This is what I call the flagship of mancavepodcasting.com. Not necessarily the most popular, the most listened to, but we are the flagship. Stories in the news. Omicron could overwhelm California hospitals within weeks. I don't know. Who's going to enforce the mask mandate? Excellent question. San Diego County's most recent UCSD says it's seeing significant bump in Omicron cases. A deluge of Omicron is coming. Santa Clara County to San Francisco. Is California facing the kind of Omicron emergency seen in the UK? From the Los Angeles Times, could humanity catch a break with Omicron? From the Wall Street Journal, Omicron surge is changing the rules of travel. From The Hill, Biden warns of winter with severe illness and death for the unvaccinated. Those stories and more, those stories and more that both John and I believe interest you employees, employers, and independent contractors. But for now, I would like to introduce my esteemed host. He was a 40 to 45 year workers' compensation, employment, labor law attorney in beautiful Southern California, but was living the socialist life, or wanted to live the socialist life. He is now retired, semi-retired, moved out to Munich, Germany about 7-8 years ago, and is truly living the socialist life. It is my pleasure, my honor to introduce my esteemed co-host for Work Comp Matters, Mr. John Scalia.
Oh, thanks for the intro, Steve. Would you like me to do the first news item?
Yeah, well, you could talk about how wonderful I am for a minute, but no. Don't just go ahead and do the news, babe. Just do the news.
Okay, this is from the Sacramento Bee. Will anyone enforce California's new mask mandate? Counties are rejecting new COVID rule. California officials say the new month-long statewide indoor mask mandate is critical to preventing another surge of COVID-19. but it's unclear who is responsible for enforcing that mandate. When asked about the lack of enforcement mechanism for the mandate, which went into effect Wednesday, Governor Gavin Newsom said he, quote, has faith, close quote, in Californians to follow it, but didn't provide specifics on what would happen if they did not. I have more faith than you do in the capacity of people to do the right thing. That's the response, Newsom told a reporter during a press conference in LA on Wednesday. I think people are more capable once they're given the why and the what to apply themselves. And I think a lot of people will self-enforce and do the right thing, close quote. Local government officials say the state hasn't given any guidance on enforcement, and some local authorities say they won't enforce the state's order at all. Some California counties, excuse me, including Sacramento, have kept their mask mandates going even after the state suspended its original one in June. Others, like Fresno, Placer, Orange, Riverside, and Stanislaus, haven't had a mask mandate for months. Some of their elected leaders say they won't help enforce the new order from state officials. You know, this gets back to the old question. You know, I don't know how often you've heard law enforcement say, we don't make the law, we just enforce it. To which I always said, that's a crock. They choose which laws to enforce. And now you're seeing it in broad daylight and exposed for the truth it is. Law enforcement only enforces the rules they like. They've become an elite. They've become their own law and order. And that's the situation.
All right. And John, you are fond of saying that you are the only attorney on the show. So I'm going to ask you a question. What the heck is the difference between a law and a mandate? That's part one.
Good question. The easy answer is I don't know. I mean, a law, though, is something that's passed by the legislature, by the California legislature. That makes it a law, makes it a statute, becomes codified and puts in the code. A mandate, in this case, I think is just something that issues from the governor's office that says, you know, this is, you know, based on public health, we're ordering everybody to do it. Now, whether that has the same binding effect as an actual statute passed by the legislature, I would have to research. But I mean, that's the essential difference.
All right.
But nonetheless, the cops' basic job, unless they think it's an illegal, you know, unless they think it's, you know, immoral, illegal, or, you know, something, their job is to enforce what's in effect. And they should have no business deciding what they're going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce. That is not the role of being a police person. The role of being a police person is to enforce the statutes and the rules and regulations. And if you don't like them, tough. But no, like I said, they always use that as a cop-out when the public says, why are you enforcing rules that don't make any sense? Like back in the old days for marijuana, and they would say, well, we don't have a choice. We're just enforcing the law. And as I used to say back then, they're lying.
Yeah. And then comes the second part of my question. If Newsom, who I, of course, affectionately refer to as the Gav, really thinks that people will do what they should do, why the heck do we need a mandate? Again, as you correctly indicated, questions came up, who's going to enforce it? The Gav said, I don't know, but I have trust in the people to do what's appropriate. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion. And again, I'm not making this opinion on statistical information or concrete evidence. It's just my opinion. We all know that as it gets colder into December and into January, people have a tendency to stay indoors more and get closer to each other. They're outdoors less. By that temperature verifiable fact only, I'm 99% positive that the main reason for this mandate is the weather, that people will cohabitate more indoors. Also, we have Christmas coming up. We have New Year's coming up. So you combine all those, and there is the general premise. Common sense would tell you that the virus is going to spread more rapidly. However, this is not a personal at-home mandate. This is a public office building or public indoor mandate only. And quite frankly, with a lot of people taking time off, people working from home. I see this as overkill. What do you think, John?
Well, I think Newsom is trying to be a politician when he says, I have faith in the people. Because if you apply that logically, then we wouldn't need any laws at all, would we? You could just say,
all right, there's an answer for you. Sure.
I mean, I'm fond of pointing out Governor Newsom and I went to the same university. We both went on scholarships. He went on a baseball scholarship. I went on an academic scholarship. So, whose opinion are you going to take? But
right. Oh, and also, by the way, John, at the last minute on the right before midnight on the 14th, the day before the mandate was to go into effect, a couple of exemptions were stricken or were mandated at the 11th hour. And one of them, of course, was the city of San Francisco. They pretty much got an exemption for the mask mandates, in addition to a couple of other counties, but I can't tell you which.
Yeah, and again, that's an indication that, you shouldn't do that. I mean, either you pass a law, it is supposed to be good for everybody. I mean, if you want to exempt San Francisco for a specific reason, what you can say is there's a mask mandate unless your city or county has X degree of compliance with the vaccine mandate, or X degree, or X number of cases or below the certain number of cases. And that way it's a fair standard for everybody. But to simply do it that way is just wrong.
And of course, Nancy Pelosi, the House of Representatives, represents San Francisco, and it's pretty difficult for her to wear her mask when she's getting her hair done. But whatever, I don't know. I've got the next news story. Omicron could overwhelm California hospitals within weeks. The rapid growth of Omicron is prompting officials to warn that hospitals could easily become overwhelmed, potentially within weeks, as they deal with a combination of Omicron, Delta, and the flu. Hospitals face new challenges if they didn't. Hospitals face new challenges that they didn't last year, when California ordered regional stay-at-home orders affecting most of the state. Now, my understanding, 100% of those that are hospitalized and in ICU and the deaths are the unvaccinated. I'm not aware, and could be wrong, of any hospitalizations due to the coronavirus for those that have been vaccinated. In California, 65% of the population, I don't have the county breakdown, there are 58 counties in California, but 65% of the California population has been fully vaccinated. 60% of the American population has been fully vaccinated. And then as far as boosters, California and the American population are running about the same currently at 20%. John.
Yeah, actually, I get my booster this coming Thursday. I think we're a little bit higher than that. I think we're at about, Germany is about 68% totally vaccinated. Anyway, okay. So in California, is California facing the kind of Omicron emergency seen in the UK? Now, since I'm reading this, and this is not a TV podcast, you can't see the nice, neat chart that is the lead into the article, but the chart has a line, it's a graph, and it shows the cases in Britain and the cases in California. And the two lines pretty much look like mirror images. The Omicron variant of the coronavirus is exploding in the United Kingdom, which might seem particularly foreboding for California, since Britain often has been a pandemic bellwether for the state. Coronavirus infections in the UK appear to be doubling every 2 to 3 days and hit an all-time high Wednesday, driven by the highly transmissible Omicron strain. The country's health chief, Dr. Jenny Harries, told Parliament members that Omicron is, quote, probably the most significant threat we've had since the start of the pandemic, close quote. But while California's case rates and other key COVID-19 metrics have followed in Britain's path for much of the pandemic, experts say this time may be different, and California may not be facing a statewide Omicron emergency like the one Prime Minister Boris Johnson says is unfolding in his country. That's because the two regions had parted ways in recent months on key public health measures, experts say, especially in their vaccination strategies and restrictions like mask rules. That may make a big difference, they say, as California braces for a possible surge fueled by Omicron. Interestingly, if anybody there is a UCLA basketball fan, UCLA just canceled their last two basketball games. The first was to be held, I think, last night against Alabama State, which is a historically Black college that is not a power. It's one of those games where UCLA pays $80,000 to the team to come into Pauley Pavilion and get beat. But their game today or tomorrow was in the Las Vegas tournament, and they were going to play North Carolina. And they've had, because of the Omicron, diagnoses in the team, they've canceled both games.
You're dialed into Work Comp Matters, where we, John and I, talk about current events and news stories that from California, mostly, that affect you employees, employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you, damn independent contractors. Work Comp Matters is brought to you by mancavepodcasting.com, where we have over 600 podcasts in the tank. They're completely free, no obligation, and you can click on that 24/7. And it's totally up to you. You don't have to subscribe or follow or nothing. Naturally, we'd like you to. And if you want to do your own podcast, I will ask you for a small little fee. And we will, of course, manage, direct, produce your podcast, get it streamed live and in the cloud forever. The content is completely yours. And for those of you on Clubhouse right now, John and I will stick around for a couple of minutes after the show, answer some questions. The podcast is going to run for another 14 minutes. If any of you want to come up and ask a question during the podcast, raise your hand and we just might bring you up. Continuing on with the news from the Los Angeles Times, in the week since Omicron variant made its presence known, scientists have braced themselves for yet another nasty surge from the virus that has killed more than 5.3 million and sickened hundreds of millions more. But as they sort through preliminary data on the strain, they're cautiously considering an unexpected possibility that with Omicron, the coronavirus may finally be cutting humanity a little slack. There's still plenty of reason to worry. Omicron has spread to at least 77 countries, found its way to at least 35 35 U.S. states, and is on track to become the dominant strain in Europe by mid-January. Well, John, my only comment is I hope it becomes the dominant strain because I'm not aware that anybody has been hospitalized or put in the ICU or died because of Omicron. Is that accurate or am I wrong?
I don't know if it's totally accurate, but yeah, essentially it is accurate. Yeah. Everything so far says Omicron is a lot less lethal than the Delta variant. And the only people who really are getting hit hard, as you pointed out, are the people who refuse to get vaccinated. So yeah, essentially it's accurate.
And what that means to me, and I'm just speculating, I'm no medical professional, that if sometime in the future we get another strain after Omicron, I would have to think that although it would be more transmissible and more contagious, it would be less disastrous, for lack of better words. It would be it would affect us less, more transmissible, but have the side effects are lessened. But just my opinion. Go ahead, John.
Okay, did California get its money's worth from a $1.7 billion COVID test contract? The Valencia Lab, a public-private venture between the state and PerkinElmer, processed only 1 to 8% of all Californians' COVID tests in the first 10 months of the contract, and the lab was riddled with dozens of problems, according to an inspection report. A patient sample that wasn't processed for more than 30 days, a test used without proper validation of its accuracy, patient results changed without notification, safety and disinfection procedures called into question. These are just a few of the myriad problems at the Valencia Branch Laboratory, a public-private COVID-19 testing lab operated by PerkinElmer that the California Department of Public Health hired in a no-bid $1.7 billion annual contract. You know, I got to remind our listeners that way back when this started, and Governor Newsom awarded a $1 billion contract for masks I'm not sure we ever saw one of them. You were pointing out, what's he doing and who's he giving it to and who are these people? And it turned out that, they had never made a mask in their lives. Anyway, an inspection report released last month by the health department outlines major problems dating back further than a year ago, raising new questions about how the state is spending taxpayer dollars to combat the pandemic. It's a really long read, so I'm going to stop pretty much there. I would point out that they talk about the difference in what the state currently pays this term, $37.78 per test, and charges schools $21 and community organizations $55 per test. That compares to $12 per test that LA Unified pays Summer Bio, another firm. So there you have it. And this was a no bid contract. And the other problem, which I didn't get to because it is a long read, it points out in the article that not only was it a no bid contract, but it's automatically renewed. So you got $1.7 billion, and apparently no matter how much they screw up, it's auto renewed. And you got to wonder, what was Newsom thinking? What was he doing? And why would anybody allow the state to have an automatically renewable contract for that amount of money, regardless of how well you did, perform your duties?
No question about it. And yeah, John, Newsom entered into a contract with a company that had never made a single mask for half $500 million, 500 million. And then the contract was voided because we found out not only had the company not made a single mask, they had never, the company had just been started like within the past year. I forgot the name of it. And then of course, the contract was voided. But as you said, Newsom has spent out like $1.7 billion in masks, and I haven't seen a single one of them. I see them on sale at Target and Walmart and gas stations and 7-Elevens, but I haven't seen or heard of the state handing out a single mask. But it is what it is. John's got a story about the NBA coming up. And so I'm going to read a story about the NFL, and then that'll probably take us closer to the end of the show. And once again, those of you in Clubhouse, John and I will stick around for a couple of minutes after the show ends in about 8 minutes. So this is from the Washington Post. The National Football League made a significant change yesterday to its coronavirus protocols, allowing a vaccinated player who tests positive for the virus but has no symptoms to test out of isolation as little as 1 day. Meanwhile, the players' union was advocating for the league to consider postponing games involving teams with large numbers of cases. The NFL Players Association believes that rescheduling games should be an option related to any teams with major outbreaks, according to a person familiar with the NFL Players Association. So the NFL Players Association and the NFL are trying to decide whether or not to postpone games, cancel games, or give them a loss. John.
This goes to labor management. And the difference is that in the NFL, the billionaire owners are totally management, and the players, no matter how well paid, are totally labor. It's quite different in the NBA because the NBA essentially is owned by the players, a good portion of it. So they operate it jointly with the owners. And this is from AP. NBA players agree to additional protocols through holidays. The NBA and its players have agreed to enhanced health and safety protocols through the holiday season in response to rising virus numbers, with additional testing coming and a return to mask usage in many situations. The upgraded mask rules will be in place until agreed otherwise by the NBA and Players Association, according to a memo shared with teams Thursday night and obtained by the AP. Masks need to be worn again in almost all circumstances during team activities, including travel, when on the bench during games, in meetings and locker room, weight room, and training room settings. The exceptions during on-court basketball activities for players and for head coaches during games. So there you have it. That's kind of the difference between having a league where the players and management actually own it together and agree to do things together, as opposed to the NFL, which is still under the old thing of we're management and we make money and you're going to do what we tell you.
John, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. And I know you're reading a totally valid story from a totally valid source, Associated Press. But did you read that the NBA players own part of the NBA? Did I hear that correctly?
It's part of the revenue sharing agreement.
Revenue sharing. Okay.
Well, that makes them owners because they're sharing revenue. I mean, they're not getting a bonus. They're sharing revenue.
But are they sharing revenue after they retire?
Well, that depends on what they negotiate for pensions.
Right.
But to give you an example of how complete it is, a few years back, the players actually sued management. They sued the owners because they found out that the owners weren't paying them revenues from the scoreboards.
What?
So
yeah, go ahead.
And the scoreboards generate quite a bit of revenue. And so, like I say, I mean, essentially they're owners because they even share in the revenue from things like the scoreboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I spoke to early. I do have another story. This will be my last story from the Washington Post. Among the rash of players unavailable to play after testing positive, the vast majority are vaccinated and many are asymptomatic. So in a time of widely available vaccines and booster shots, would it be safe for sports leagues to allow vaccinated asymptomatic players who test positive for the coronavirus to play in games? That day may come, public health experts say, with improved testing capability, allowing players to safely return to play sooner, but is not here yet. And that is, again, is from the Washington Post, why asymptomatic positive athletes still need to sit out. John.
Do you want me to read another story here?
It's up to you, buddy. You can read, we've got like 2 minutes left. You can read a story, burning desire, closing thought. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, I was going to go all the way down and just talk about the fact that Joe Biden's Build Back Positive legislation, the $1.75 trillion bill for the economy, is being held hostage by two senators who are members of his own party, Kristen Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who are both allegedly Democrats. And so right now the whole thing is in a cocked hat and it's been put on hold. So, and that affects other things, like it affects people with kids getting certain benefits that are going to be shut off at the end of December. It affects possible tax credits for childcare. So it certainly is going to it has an impact on the labor force as to whether or not it gets passed. And right now, it's probably 50-50,
Yeah, well, all I can say is I truly, sincerely hope Joe Biden stays healthy for another 3.5 years. No, seriously, I'm dead serious, man.
No, I'm laughing because my very good friend worked very closely with Jerry Brown, and he's, and he knew Kamala Harris, very well, and he's not a big fan. So that's all.
Well,
that's all I'll say about that.
John, I don't know if you saw the story last week, but apparently a lot of people in her office or in her circle either quit or have been complaining. There are a lot of people within Kamala Harris's circle that are not happy with her. But
yeah, I did see that story.
Yeah, exactly. But
go ahead. And my friend, who's a genius, also does not hold her intellect in great regard.
Okay, well, that's it. We've come to the end of Work Comp Matters, and thank you all very much for listening. For Scott Walton of Legendary Uncle Studios, for John Scalia in Munich, Germany, my team, my crew, my peeps at mancavepodcasting.com. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you all again Monday, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, live for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.